introducing our final presenter, not our final speaker, but our final case study presenter, which is Matthew Johnston. And Matthew is going to talk to us about de-tabooing disposals in regional museums. So I'm now going to welcome Matthew to join me on screen, and I'm going to hand over to him. Thanks, Matthew.
Hello, everyone. And yeah, thank you, Sarah, for the introduction. Let me just move along. So I'm going to talk to you today about our 2-year John Ellerman Foundation funded project that just came to an end this summer. And this was split between Tullie and our Cumbria Museum Consortium partners at Lakeland Arts. But I'm just going to talk about the Tullie part of the project today. And also just to say before I start that all of the hard work on this has been done by our project staff. So Claire in year 1 and Lewis in year 2. So any credit is very much theirs and not mine. Right. So what was the project all about? Essentially, it's been a process of rationalization and deaccessioning with a focus on the social history and costume collections, where we'd identified a greater proportion of objects that didn't align with our current collections development policy. So basically things that if we were offered today, we wouldn't be accessioning into the collection. And we didn't want to reach a point where the collections became stagnant because we'd run out of space to continue collecting, and therefore running the risk of the collections losing their relevance to our audiences because they no longer reflect Carlisle and its people. And what's been clear from the last panel discussion is that this isn't something that we're alone in. Just to read some of these scary quotes out to you, the majority of museum collections have been described as being in a state of stasis or decay. 94% of museum stores are full, and that was back in 2012. And an estimated 10 to 15% of museum objects in storage just don't belong there. So that's why we've been carrying out this project. How has it gone? Well, going into this, we had 3 main objectives. So I'm going to talk about each one in turn and then just say a little bit about what we've done. So this first objective is all about testing the workflow for rationalization and disposal, making sure it's embedded into the organization and that it becomes part of normal practice so that the team gain confidence in being able to carry out collections review and disposal going forward. So this is what we've come up with, and I'm not expecting you to be able to read all of this. It's more of a visual reference for the rubric that we've created to help decide whether objects would be suitable candidates for disposal. Now, this has actually come from a version of a collections review rubric that was put together by University College London for their collections, and then further adapted by Shakespeare's Birthplace Trust. And I don't have time to go into all of the ins and outs of this. That would be a whole presentation itself. But essentially, we have 6 different categories that we assess objects on, with each of those categories getting a score between 1 to 4. And then that final total will help inform our decision as to how suitable an object might be for disposal. So once we have our candidates for disposal, we've then set up this 3-stage approval process before any deaccessioning can be authorized. So firstly, the objects will go to our internal collections development panel, which means monthly, and that discusses all potential acquisitions and now also disposals to and from the collection. And that's made up of our curatorial team alongside representatives from learning and also marketing. And if objects are approved here, then we then make a recommendation for a route for disposal, and that is then suggested to our senior leadership team. So they provide further scrutiny and then are able to either agree the recommendation, request further information, or decide to retain the object. And then although the museum is run as an independent trust, ultimately the collections still belong to Cumberland Council. So they provide the 3rd and final level of approval before any disposals can take place. And I'm pleased to say that this is now part of normal practice. So each collections development panel meeting now has a standing item agenda for disposals, and the team have become confident in bringing items for disposal to the panel from all areas of the collection, not just social history. So here are a few examples of those. We've got the clay pipes on the left from the archaeology collection that had very little contextual information with them. Next to those, we've got some mineral specimens from our natural science collections, which have been affected by pyrite decay, so are posing a risk to other objects nearby in the store. And then on the right here, we've got this very sad-looking display of degrading wax fruit from the decorative arts collection. So hopefully you'll agree that the first objective has been achieved. The second objective is all about using the space created through disposals to be able to better care for the remaining collection and also to be able to grow the collection in a way that more closely aligns with our collections development policy. So bringing in new objects and new stories that will be tighter and richer than the ones we've been able to tell previously. So just to give a quick run through of the objects that have gone through disposals process so far, and I apologize in advance for all the numbers I'm about to bombard you with, but we've had 310 objects go through the collections development panel. Out of these, 248 have been recommended for disposal and sent to the senior leadership team. SLT have discussed 221 of these, of which 194 have been agreed with those recommendations for disposal and passed on to Cumberland Council. Now, this for us has been the most lengthy part of the process because the local government structure in Cumbria has recently had a massive reorganisation. And it's taken a bit of time to properly implement that and to get things sort of settled again. And as you can imagine, the kind of non-priority matters, such as disposals from museum collections, have been taking a lot longer to resolve. So out of these, we have had a final decision made on 157 items. But this has taken the best part of a year to come through. But then they've all come through together, and everything that the council has looked at, they have approved. It's just taken a little while to get there. And then out of these, 84 objects have been successfully rehomed through the disposals process. So where's everything gone? Well, a lot of it hasn't actually gone that far. These are some of the objects that have become part of the learning team's collection. And in some cases, this was because they'd already been on long-term loan to them, and we were just officially deaccessioning and transferring those. Some of them are new objects from the disposals process that the learning team have basically had first refusal on. So things that maybe don't have those strong stories or local links, but are still useful for use in kind of school and community engagement work. Next, I'm going to look at transfer to other museums. So when this project started, we kind of assumed that this was going to be the main route for objects leaving the collection. But I think actually the kind of things that we've got in our stores that shouldn't be there are the same kind of things that are in other museum stores that shouldn't be there. So that's posed a bit of a challenge for us in this project. And these are actually the only 3 objects that have been transferred to other museums. One of the things that we did want to do as part of this process is to try and reduce the environmental impact as much as possible. So things are being offered as locally as possible in the first instance. So the Air Raid Warden's coat in the centre here has been one of our big wins in this regard, because this was literally just carried over the road to Cumbria's Museum of Military Life based at Carlisle Castle. On the left-hand side, we've then got this farmer smock, which is a lovely object, but had nothing to do with Carlisle or Cumbria. It was from Nottinghamshire, I believe. So that's now been transferred to a more specialist museum elsewhere. And then on the right, we've got this Roman altar, which was found in Maryport and has actually been on long-term loan from us to the Sen House Roman Museum there for many years. And that loan period came to an end. So we've formally transferred that because it makes much more sense for it to be where it is and has much more relevance to the local community there. So I think one of our biggest successes and also biggest surprises is the amount of material that's been disposed of via creative reuse. And this is a relatively new avenue for museum disposals, but one that is encouraged by the Museums Association's off-the-shelf disposals toolkit. So on the left, you can see some items that have been transferred to a local textiles group that meets at the museum. And we've had some really good feedback on this as to how it provides a really unique dimension to the group. So they can use these historical items for their creative projects and for inspiration. On the right-hand side, we've then got these objects here, the child's bike, three-piece suite, and washing machine. And these are just a few of the many objects that are being transferred to the local amateur theatre company for use in their props department. And some of these have already been earmarked for use in future productions. So it's really great that all of these objects that were sitting unused in our stores are now finding this second life where they can be used and appreciated by the local community. So the other part of this objective was about finding space for new objects and stories. And some of that's actually come from the research done on potential candidates for disposal. So on the left-hand side here, you can see this ladder, which you'd be forgiven for thinking was just part of the building. I know I did when I first saw it. It's actually an object, and it's part of the railway signalling apparatus from Quintin's Hill near Gretna Green on the Carlisle to Glasgow line, which in 1915 was the site of Britain's worst rail disaster. So it's a hugely significant object with a really important story to tell. And just a reminder that collections review isn't all about getting rid of stuff. Sometimes it's about being able to make the most of what you've already got. So next to this on the right, one of the areas of the social history collection that came under review was medical bags. So we had quite a lot that were either in poor condition, they didn't have contents, or they didn't have local links. And by rationalizing those, we've created space to be able to take in this new, really serendipitously timed acquisition of this medical bag that belonged to a named Carlisle GP. It has its contents with it and was donated along with other objects that reflected the GP's war service in the medical corps. So we're able to tell this really rich local story with this new item or set of items that we couldn't previously do with the objects that we had in the collection. So the third objective is a really important one because we didn't want this project to be done in isolation, so that we did all this work and became really confident in disposals, but then another museum down the road maybe then has to go through the same process all over again. So we wanted there to be more of a legacy and to be opportunities for knowledge sharing among regional museums. So what have we done to achieve this? Well, in the first year, we did a lot of initial communications work. So we set up a dedicated area of our website where we had introductory and progress blogs, and really tried to set out what we meant by disposals from a museum point of view for the general public, and try and bring everyone along on this project with us. We also organized some store tours for various stakeholder groups so they could really come in and see the extent of the problem that we had and why we had to carry out this work, and to try and help them become ambassadors for the project as well. The team also did various presentations on project progress, particularly findings from the research stage. So, for example, presenting a guide on identifying mold on museum objects. And then in the second year, obviously we were further on in the process, so we had much more of a focus on skills and knowledge sharing. We organised a workshop on collections review and disposals for Cumbrian museums, which was led by Jenny Durrant, who of course we've all just heard from. And there was room there also for follow-up surgery sessions for participants with specific questions about navigating disposals in their own collections. We also gave a presentation at the Museums Development North conference, and it was clear there as well that there was a real appetite amongst museums there for more information and case studies relating to disposal. So, what have we learned overall? Well, disposals can sound negative and can be a bit of a dirty word, but we found that it's a really good opportunity as well for promoting positive relationships with new organizations that you maybe haven't had a chance to work with before. I'd also really recommend putting in the time for those initial communications and try and bring everyone along with you, because by doing that, we found that I'm pretty sure we've had no negative feedback at all throughout the course of the project. So that's been really amazing. It's important to have a clear collections development policy. So when you know what should be in your collection, you also have a better idea of what shouldn't be there. And it also gives you that really clear foundation on which to justify any recommended disposals. Really embrace creative reuse as a way to reduce on waste produced through disposal, particularly for objects that might be in really poor condition. That you might not think would be able to find another home. We've been quite surprised by some of the things that people have been willing to take. And then the big one is that this can really take a long time and much longer than you would like. So I would say don't go into this if you're expecting some really quick space-saving wins, but do make use of that extra waiting time to be able to conduct some thorough research, to kind of look out for potential interest groups who might want to take on your objects, and also to put out those communications and updates for stakeholders. So yes, that brings me to the end of the presentation. I know we've got the Q&A coming up, but if you think of any other questions you want to ask after that, or just want to reach out to me via email, my details are here. So thank you very much for your time.